Sebring International Raceway is a famous racing circuit located in Florida. It's been used in various shapes and configurations since 1950, and like many tracks of the era, is based around the edge of a former wartime airfield. It's used largely for sports car racing, with various IMSA, GT, Trans Am, World Endurance Championship and even early F1 races taking place at the venue. It's well known for being very bumpy in places, so it's interesting to see how it's been represented in PC games over the years, and to see which get the feeling of the track right. Before we get into a lap of the track, there are a few games which didn't quite make the cut, so let's list those first. First up, the low polygon Unity-based Barrow games are full-speed arcade games where you can take every corner at maximum speed. The Sebring track appears both in Barrow F22 with Formula 1 style cars, along with its car racing sister game Barrow GT, both of which released in 2022. These are too simple to fit into the list of games we'll be looking at. Similarly, the Heads Go Racing game, also from 2022, uses a very similar simplified track model, which won't fit well amongst the upcoming games. We'll also skip over Mad Car for PC, which is exclusive to the Epic Games Store. This uses the same model as Heads Go Racing for the track, but has even more arcade handling. The in-car view for Mad Car is not good either, nor is the handling. So without further ado, let's begin a lap in time. Sebring. We start with Sports Car GT from Image Space Inc. This is the first simulation game they made before F1 2000 and shares the same sort of blue feel that game had. The graphics here are pretty basic, so we'll move on to 2002 and here's Total Immersion Racing from Razorworks. This has a kind of arcade feel to the game, and the trees also look somewhat more European instead of American. Moving on to 2014, and this is The Crew, captured before the game was shut down. The track is entirely paved here and is too wide and has too much excess scenery outside the edges, but they are modelling the entire USA here, so something had to give. Forza Motorsport 6 Apex has a very nicely lit version of the track. Given that this game came out in 2016, the lighting is pre-baked and doesn't really evolve much, but it does look really nice. Next up came Forza Motorsport 7, which has a later time of day and everything feels a little bit more gloomy here, but the track is very similar to Forza Motorsport 6 Apex, obviously. But the lighting is still pretty good overall. Moving on, here's rFactor 2's version of the track, which released in 2018. This has a good feeling of Florida on a really hot day. Everything's really bright and it makes it feel like it's baking hot. It's a laser scan version of the track too, as is the track in iRacing, which also feels like it's Florida on a hot day. There's not so much scenery at the edges of this version of the track. This is the 2023 updated version with extra texture work around the edges. Next up is Le Mans Ultimate, which added the track in February 2024. This is very similar to the rFactor 2 version, but it does have lots of stuff at the edges of the circuit, making it feel like you're in a really big event that's going on. Forza Motorsport from 2023 added the track in June 2024. I'm not sure the textures are showing at their best quality here, but again they made it feel even more of an event with loads of stuff at the edges of the track. And finally here's Automobilista 2, which added the track in November 2024, and this is probably the most accurate version of the circuit yet, with lots of detail, and across the line. Let's now compare 4 locations around the track against real life. Here's the pit straight from 2022. The camera here has a slight fisheye lens on it, which is why the press box building looks a bit curved here, but it's the best reference lap I could find. First up, here's Sports Car GT. This was from 1999 and the press building was only built that year, so it's not present here. Total Immersion Racing has the building, but it's all fairly generic looking. The Crew is very basic looking, and notice the dust and smoke effects on the track. I'm not sure why there's a giant transmitter tower in the background, but the Crew replicates the whole of the USA, so it's likely much further away in real life. Here's Forza Motorsport 6 Apex, which has a very low sun. I quite like the baked-in lighting effects here though. Forza Motorsport 7 is later in the day and looks a bit gloomier, with a nice sky. Here's rFactor 2, which feels a bit lifeless colour-wise. iRacing has the feel of Florida down well, with a slightly dusty feeling sky. The textures on the buildings are all spot on. Le Mans Ultimate has much better lighting than R-Factor 2, but the track model is extremely similar. Here's the 2023 Forza Motorsport. The textures here may not be at their optimal size, as my PC is rather old now and doesn't even use an SSD to run the game. And finally, here's the newest Automobilista 2 version of the track, which is probably the best one yet. Next up, let's move to the bridge with the 7 Sebring Raceway Hotel in the background. Sports Car GT has no hotel, as it was only constructed the year the game was released. Total Immersion Racing has the hotel in its earlier cream colour scheme. The Crew does have the hotel, but it's far in the distance. Nothing here is quite right. Forza Motorsport 6 Apex is showing off its very authentic lighting here. The catch fencing is a bit dense though. Forza Motorsport 7 has even thicker catch fencing and looks a bit drab. R-Factor 2 has the blue colour scheme on the hotel and everything is modelled very accurately, but it too looks a bit drab. iRacing looks a bit cartoon-like, but the modelling is done well. Le Mans Ultimate has much more natural lighting. Forza Motorsport 2023 isn't showing its best textures here, so it looks a bit like Grand Prix 4 if anything. Finally, Automobilista 2 has the most up-to-date Mobile 50 years branding. It also feels very natural, lighting-wise. Moving on, here's a shot further around the track. I've picked this due to the lone tree on the left. It's always interesting to see which tracks model small details like this. Also note the large granite factory in the background with the green corner. Sports Car GT has some trees, but they're all the same 3D model, and there's no building here. It also has the same light blue tint that the first F1 2000 game from ISI also had. Total Immersion Racing is even more basic and rather inaccurate. The Crew has extremely different buildings here, a bunch of derelict warehouses. The grass strip on the left is very wrong too. Forza Motorsport 6 Apex has the building right, but no tree. In Forza Motorsport 7 the entire building has become green. Everything else isn't much different modelling wise. R-Factor 2 has a lot of detail, maybe not all of it is accurate, and there's no tree. iRacing is the first game to get the tree in place, but it also has a lot of palm trees in front of the building, which aren't there in real life. Le Mans Ultimate takes a step back with no tree and the same scenery as R-Factor 2. Forza Motorsport 2023 has the tree, and is pretty accurate, though the track is a lot cleaner looking. Finally, here's Automobilista 2, and it's the most accurate version yet. The last location we'll look at is Sunset Bend and the famous bridge, leading back to the pit straight. Here's the real life shot first. Sports Car GT is rather basic here, with lollipop trees. Total Immersion Racing is also very basic, with huge trees. The Crew has a lot of trees on the left, which aren't there in real life, but again, the game models the whole of the USA, so there's a lot of stuff off track that's not there in real life. The track also lacks the concrete panelled sections of the circuit, it's entirely paved. Forza Motorsport 6 Apex looks really good, with lots of skid marks and details. Forza Motorsport 7 is more gloomy, but otherwise pretty good. R-Factor 2 has overly large trees, but is otherwise pretty good as well. iRacing is better, with more accurate trees and scenery. Le Mans Ultimate basically reuses the track from R-Factor 2 with some tweaks, so the giant trees are back again. Forza Motorsport 2023 definitely hasn't loaded the highest quality textures here, but the scenery is very accurate to real life. And finally, here's Automobilista 2, which is likely the most accurate version of all at the time of making this comparison. Let's finish off by putting various games head to head. We'll start with the earliest games first. Here are the 3 Forza Motorsport games head to head. R-Factor 2 versus Le Mans Ultimate shows it's clearly the same track model. And here's iRacing versus Automobilista 2. Let's go mad and run all 10 at once. And that completes the lap. If you like this video, then like, subscribe and ring the bell in order to find out when you can watch the next A Lap in Time.